Millionaire pretended to be a janitor in his own company and was shocked by what he discovered. Nathaniel Parker stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his father's office, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape below. The golden hues of sunset painted the sky, casting long shadows across the urban landscape. It was a view he had seen countless times growing up, but today it felt different. Today the weight of an empire rested on his shoulders. At just 28 years old, Nathaniel had inherited Parker Enterprises, the multinational corporation his father had built from the ground up. It was a legacy that stretched back decades, a testament to his father's vision and determination. But now, barely a month after the funeral, Nathaniel found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about the company and the man who had created it. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of frustration he had picked up from his father. The board meeting earlier that day had been a disaster. The quarterly report showed declining profits, whispers of unethical practices were circulating in the media, and the tension among the executives was palpable. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. His eyes fell on a framed photo on the desk and his father at his college graduation. Jonathan Parker's arm was draped proudly over his son's shoulders, both of them beaming at the camera. It was hard to reconcile that image with the rumors he'd been hearing, the discrepancies he'd noticed in the company's records. "What am I missing, Dad?" Nathaniel murmured, picking up the frame. "What didn't you tell me?" A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Parker?" It was Martha, his father's longtime secretary. "Richard would like to see you about the Asia expansion project." Nathaniel nodded, setting the photo down. "I'll be right there, Martha. Thank you." As Martha closed the door, Nathaniel's gaze lingered on the photo. There was something in his father's eyes, a shadow he had never noticed before. Was it guilt, worry, or was he just seeing what he wanted to see, desperate for answers in a sea of uncertainty? He straightened his tie and took a deep breath. Richard, the company's director and his father's closest ally, had been pushing hard for the Asian expansion. It was a risky move, especially given the company's current state, but Richard insisted it was necessary for growth. As Nathaniel made his way to the conference room, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. The corridors of Parker Enterprises, once so familiar and comforting, now felt like a maze of secrets and half-truths. Employees nodded respectfully as he passed, but their smiles seemed forced, their eyes averted too quickly. Pausing outside the conference room, Nathaniel steeled himself. He could hear Richard's voice inside, confident and persuasive as always. But for the first time, Nathaniel found himself questioning the man's motives. Was Richard truly looking out for the company's best interests, or was there something more sinister at play? So with a final deep breath, Nathaniel pushed open the door. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Richard stood at the head of the table, a broad smile on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ah, Nathaniel, just in time. We were just discussing the projected returns on the Asia expansion. I think you'll be very pleased with the numbers." Nathaniel nodded, taking his seat at the opposite end of the table. As Richard launched into his presentation, Nathaniel's mind raced. He knew that the decisions made in this room would shape the future of Parker Enterprises. But more than that, they would define his own legacy as a leader. In that moment, surrounded by the polished wood and gleaming technology of the conference room, Nathaniel made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. He owed it to his father, to a company, and to himself. So the path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and difficult choices. But Nathaniel Parker was determined to see it through. Little did he know, the journey he was about to embark on would challenge everything he thought he knew about business, family, and himself. The truth, as he would soon discover, was far more complex and far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The Asia expansion meeting had left Nathaniel with more questions than answers. As he paced the length of his office later that evening, the pieces of a disturbing puzzle began to fall into place. The inconsistencies in the financial reports, the hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when he entered a room, the subtle changes in Richard's demeanor It all pointed to something deeply wrong at the heart of Parker Enterprises. Nathaniel's mind raced, recalling his father's words from years ago: "Son, in business, trust is worth more than money. But don't be fooled, loyalty can be bought, and it can be sold." At the time he had dismissed it as typical fatherly advice. Now those words echoed in his mind with newfound significance. He stopped at the window, his reflection staring back at him from the darkened glass. The young man in the tailored suit looked every bit the part of a CEO, but Nathaniel felt like an imposter. How could he lead a company when he couldn't even trust the people closest to him? That's when the idea struck him, a plan so audacious, so risky, that it both thrilled and terrified him. If he wanted to know the truth, he needed to see the company from the ground up. He needed to become invisible. Nathaniel's heart raced as he considered the implications. He would have to disappear to become someone else entirely. It was crazy, potentially disastrous for the company if he was discovered, but the more he thought about it, the more certain he became that it was the only way. He would become a janitor. The logistics alone were daunting. He'd need a new identity, a way to move through the company unnoticed. But Nathaniel was determined. He spent the next few days meticulously planning, using his resources carefully to avoid arousing suspicion. A week later, Nathaniel stood in front of the mirror in a small, rented apartment across town. Gone was the tailored suit, replaced by a plain blue janitor's uniform. He had let his beard grow out, and colored contacts changed his eye color. But a pair of thick-rimmed glasses completed the transformation. Nathan he practiced, trying out his new name, Nathan Thompson. As he prepared to leave for his first night shift, Nathaniel felt a mix of excitement and fear. He knew the risks were enormous. If he was discovered, it could mean the end of his career, possibly even legal consequences. But the need to know the truth outweighed everything else. He arrived at Parker Enterprises through the employee entrance, his heart pounding as he showed his fake ID to security. The guard barely glanced at it before waving him through. Nathaniel felt a twinge of concern at how easy it had been to infiltrate his own company. As he pushed a mop bucket down the hallway, Nathaniel was struck by how different the building felt at night. The bustling offices were silent, the long corridors eerily empty. He passed by his own office, the nameplate Nathaniel Parker gleaming in the dim light. It was surreal, like looking at a life he had left behind. Throughout that first shift, Nathaniel kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with the few employees working late. He listened intently to every conversation, every whispered exchange. Already he was picking up on undercurrents of discontent, snippets of information that painted a troubling picture. As dawn broke and Nathaniel clocked out, exhausted but exhilarated, he knew he had made the right decision. This was just the beginning, but he was already peeling back layers of deception that he never knew existed. Walking home in the early morning light, Nathaniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just the heir to Parker Enterprises. He was its secret protector, determined to uncover the truth and restore the company to what his father had always intended it to be. Little did he know the path ahead would test him in ways he could never have imagined, and the truth he sought would come at a price higher than he was prepared to pay. The first week of Nathaniel's undercover operation passed in a blur of mop buckets, trash bags, and late-night encounters. Each shift brought new challenges as he navigated the delicate balance between maintaining his cover and gathering information. The physical demands of the job took their toll. Muscles he didn't know he had ached from the constant cleaning, and the late hours left him perpetually exhausted. Yet, despite the fatigue, Nathaniel found himself more alert than ever. Every conversation overheard in the break room, every document glimpsed on a desk, every interaction between employees became a potential clue. He was seeing Parker Enterprises through new eyes, and the view was both enlightening and troubling. So on his third night, while cleaning the accounting department, Nathaniel overheard two employees discussing discrepancies in the books. Their hushed tones and furtive glances spoke volumes. "I'm telling you, these numbers don't add up," one whispered. But Richard said to leave it alone. "What are we supposed to do?" The other shrugged. a look of resignation on his face. What we always do, keep our heads down and our mouths shut if we want to keep our jobs. Nathaniel's heart raced as he pretended to focus on emptying trash cans. This was exactly the kind of information he was looking for, but it also filled him with a deep sense of unease. How long had this been going on? And how deep did the corruption run? As the days wore on, Nathaniel began to notice patterns. The night security guard who always seemed to look the other way when certain executives worked late. The IT technician who routinely performed system maintenance in the early hours of the morning. The cleaning crew supervisor who insisted on personally handling certain floors and offices. Each observation was like a piece of a complex puzzle, and Nathaniel found himself staying up late in his rented apartment, scribbling notes and connecting dots on a large corkboard. The picture that was emerging was far more intricate and troubling than he had initially imagined. But it wasn't all darkness and conspiracy. Nathaniel also witnessed moments of genuine camaraderie and dedication among the employees. He saw junior staff staying late to help each other meet deadlines, maintenance workers going above and beyond to fix problems, and managers taking the time to mentor their teams. These glimpses of the company's true potential only strengthened Nathaniel's resolve. Parker Enterprises wasn't beyond saving, it just needed someone to shine a light on the shadows that had been allowed to grow. As Nathaniel settled into his routine, he began to form connections with his fellow janitors. There was Mike, a gruff but kind-hearted veteran who had been with the company for over 2 decades. Sarah, a single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet. And then there was Carlos, a recent immigrant with dreams of starting his own business someday. These relationships provided Nathaniel with more than just cover. They gave him insight into the lives of the people who kept Parker Enterprises running smoothly day after day. Their stories of struggle, resilience, and aspirations touched him deeply, making him all the more determined to root out the corruption that was threatening their livelihoods. One night, about 2 weeks into his undercover stint, Nathaniel found himself cleaning the executive floor. As he approached Richard's office, he noticed a sliver of light under the door. Pausing, he heard muffled voices from within. "The board is getting suspicious," Richard's voice, tense and irritated. "We need to move faster." "It's risky," Martha replied, her usual calm demeanor sounding strained. "If we push too hard, we might expose everything." "We don't have a choice," Richard snapped. "With the old man gone and his naive son at the helm, this is our best chance. We just need to keep Nathaniel distracted long enough to finish the job." Nathaniel's blood ran cold. He had suspected Richard and Martha might be involved, but hearing it confirmed sent a wave of betrayal washing over him. These were people his father had trusted implicitly, people Nathaniel had known his entire life. As he continued his rounds, mind reeling from what he'd overheard, Nathaniel nearly collided with another figure in the dimly lit hallway. His heart leaped into his throat, fearing he'd been caught eavesdropping. "Oh, I'm so sorry," a soft voice exclaimed. "I didn't see you there." Nathaniel looked up, finding himself face to face with a young woman he didn't recognize. She wore the same uniform as him, but there was something about her that immediately caught his attention. So perhaps it was the warmth in her eyes or the gentle smile she offered despite the late hour. "No worries," Nathaniel managed to reply, remembering his cover. "I'm Nathan. I don't think we've met before." "CLA," she responded, extending her hand. "I usually work the day shift, but I'm covering for a friend tonight." As they shook hands, Nathaniel felt an unexpected connection. There was a genuineness to CLA that stood in stark contrast to the deception he'd been uncovering. Little did he know, this chance encounter would be the beginning of a relationship that would change everything, for him, for Parker Enterprises, and for the truth he was so desperately seeking. The chance encounter with CLA in the dimly lit hallway marked a turning point in Nathaniel's undercover journey. As they continued to cross paths during their shifts, a friendship began to blossom. One that would prove to be both a source of comfort and complexity in the days to come. CLA, Nathaniel quickly learned, was more than just another member of the cleaning staff. She possessed a quiet wisdom and an unwavering work ethic that set her apart. Her real name was Clara, but everyone called her CLA, clean like an angel, a nickname she'd earned for her meticulous attention to detail. One night, as they took their break together in the deserted staff lounge, CLA shared a bit of her story with Nathaniel. "I've been here for 5 years now," she said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and puts my daughter through school." And Nathaniel felt a pang of guilt at the reminder of the vast disparity between his privileged upbringing and the struggles of the average worker. "Do you have a daughter?" he asked, genuinely interested. Cele's face lit up with pride. "Sophia, she's 12 and smart as a whip, dreams of being a scientist someday." As CLA spoke about her daughter's aspirations, Nathaniel found himself drawn in by her warmth and sincerity. It was refreshing, especially in contrast to the web of deceit he'd been uncovering in the upper echelons of the company. Their late-night conversations became a regular occurrence, a bright spot in the otherwise tense and secretive atmosphere of Nathaniel's mission. CLA shared stories of her life, her struggles as a single mother, and her hopes for the future. In turn, Nathaniel found himself opening up more than he intended, sharing carefully edited versions of his own experiences and doubts. "You know, Nathan," CLA said one night, as they mopped the lobby together, "you're different from the other guys who come through here. You actually seem to care about what's going on around you." Nathaniel felt a mix of pride and unease at her words. "I guess I just believe that everyone's job is important, no matter what it is," he replied, careful not to reveal too much. CLA nodded approvingly. "That's a rare attitude, especially in a place like this. Sometimes it feels like the higher-ups forget we even exist." Her words struck a chord with Nathaniel, reinforcing his determination to uncover the truth and make things right. But as their friendship deepened, he found himself increasingly conflicted. The more he got to know CLA, the harder it became to maintain his cover, to keep her at arm's length. One evening, as they were finishing up their shift, CLA invited Nathaniel to join her and some of the other night staff for breakfast at a nearby diner. "It's kind of a tradition," she explained with a smile. "A way to unwind after a long night." Nathaniel hesitated, aware that getting too close to his co-workers could jeopardize his mission. But the genuine warmth in CLA's invitation, coupled with his growing need for connection in this isolated role, made him nod in agreement. The diner was a small, cozy place, filled with the aroma of coffee and the quiet chatter of early morning patrons. As Nathaniel sat with CLA and the others, listening to their stories and sharing laughs over greasy food, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in a long time. But even in this moment of camaraderie, Nathaniel couldn't fully relax. His eyes kept darting to the TV in the corner, where a business news channel was reporting on Parker Enterprises' latest stock movements. The ticker at the bottom of the screen showed a slight dip, and Nathaniel knew it was likely due to the rumors of internal strife that had begun to circulate. CLA noticed his distraction. "Everything okay, Nathan?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Nathaniel forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking about some personal stuff. Nothing to worry about." As he looked at CLA's caring face, Nathaniel felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to confide in her, to share the burden of his secret mission. But he knew he couldn't. Not only would it compromise his investigation, but it could also put CLA in danger. Instead, he changed the subject, asking CLA more about her daughter's science projects. As she enthusiastically described Sophia's latest experiment, Nathaniel made a silent vow. He would see this through, not just for the company, but for people like CLA and her daughter, the ones who truly deserved a fair shake in life. Little did Nathaniel know, his growing attachment to CLA would soon complicate his mission in ways he never anticipated, testing his resolve and forcing him to confront difficult truths about himself and the world he thought he knew. As weeks passed, Nathaniel's dual life as CEO by day and janitor by night began to yield results. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, revealing a picture far more disturbing than he had initially imagined. It wasn't just Richard and Martha, the corruption seemed to permeate multiple levels of the company hierarchy. One particularly revealing night, Nathaniel was cleaning the finance department when he overheard a heated conversation between two mid-level managers. "Look, I don't like it any more than you do," one whispered urgently, but Richard made it clear. "We either cook the books or we're out of a job." The other manager sighed heavily. "I've got a family to support. I can't afford to lose this job, but this feels wrong." Nathaniel's heart raced as he pretended to be engrossed in dusting nearby shelves. He had suspected financial irregularities, but hearing it confirmed so blatantly sent a chill down his spine. As he continued his rounds, Nathaniel paid closer attention to the documents left on desks and the conversations happening in hushed tones around water coolers. He began to notice patterns, certain projects with inflated budgets, offshore accounts mentioned in passing, and a recurring name, Chimera Holdings. Curious about this Chimera Holdings, Nathaniel used his limited break time to do some research on his phone. What he found was troubling. Chimera was a shell company seemingly created for the sole purpose of funneling money out of Parker Enterprises. The trail was cleverly hidden, but Nathaniel's unique position allowed him to connect dots that others might miss. One night, while cleaning Richard's office, Nathaniel took a calculated risk. Ensuring he was alone, he quickly rifled through some files left on the desk. His hands trembled as he photographed incriminating documents with his phone. Contracts with forged signatures, memos discussing creative accounting, and a list of offshore bank accounts. As he replaced the documents exactly as he had found them, Nathaniel heard footsteps approaching. With his heart pounding, he barely managed to resume his cleaning duties before Martha walked in. "Oh," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I didn't realize anyone was still here." Nathaniel kept his head down, mumbling a quiet apology as he continued mopping. Martha lingered for a moment, her eyes narrowing suspiciously before retrieving a file and leaving. Once she was gone, Nathaniel let out a shaky breath. The close call had rattled him, but the information he had gathered was invaluable. It confirmed his worst fears. Richard and Martha were indeed at the center of a massive embezzlement scheme. As the nights wore on, Nathaniel's discoveries became increasingly alarming. He uncovered evidence of bribery, insider trading, and even hints of industrial espionage. The scope of the corruption was staggering, and it was clear that it had been going on for years, possibly even during his father's tenure. This realization brought with it a new wave of conflicting emotions. Had his father known? Had he been complicit? The thought made Nathaniel's stomach churn. He had always idolized his father, seen him as the epitome of business ethics. Now, he wasn't sure what to believe. One evening, while cleaning the HR department, Nathaniel stumbled upon something that hit particularly close to home. A memo detailing plans for massive layoffs, primarily targeting long-term employees who were closer to retirement. The justification was cost-cutting, but Nathaniel saw it for what it was, a way to eliminate those who might have knowledge of the company's questionable practices. As he read the names on the list, his heart sank. Many were people he had known since childhood, loyal employees who had dedicated their lives to Parker Enterprises. And there, near the bottom of the list, was a name that made his blood run cold: Clara Anderson, CLA. Nathaniel felt a surge of anger and protective instinct. CLA, with her unwavering work ethic and dreams for her daughter's future, didn't deserve this. None of them did. It was a stark reminder of the human cost of corporate greed. As he grappled with this new information, Nathaniel found himself at a crossroads. The corruption ran deeper than he had ever imagined, and untangling it would be a monumental task. But now it wasn't just about saving the company anymore. It was about protecting the people who had built it from the ground up. Later that week, during one of their now regular coffee breaks, CLA noticed Nathaniel's distracted demeanor. "Nathan, is everything okay?" she asked, a voice laced with genuine concern. "You seem troubled lately." Nathaniel managed a weak smile. "Just thinking about the future, I guess. This job life, sometimes it feels like the odds are stacked against us, you know? CLA nodded sympathetically. I know that feeling all too well, but you can't let it get you down. We just have to keep pushing forward, doing our best. That's all any of us can do. Her words, meant to be comforting, only intensified Nathaniel's inner turmoil. Here was CLA facing potential unemployment, yet still maintaining hope and dignity. It strengthened his resolve to set things right, but also deepened his guilt about his deception. As he lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, Nathaniel realized that his mission had evolved. It wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore, it was about justice, about protecting the vulnerable, about restoring Parker Enterprises to what it should be, a company that valued its people as much as its profits. But as Nathaniel drifted off into an uneasy sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The corruption he had uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg, and diving deeper would undoubtedly bring dangers he couldn't yet foresee. Little did he know, his journey was about to take a turn that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his family, his company, and himself. With each passing night, Nathaniel's determination to uncover the full extent of the corruption grew stronger. He knew that to bring down Richard and Martha, he needed irrefutable evidence, the kind that would stand up in court and leave no room for doubt. This meant taking greater risks and pushing the boundaries of his undercover role. Nathaniel began to strategically position himself to overhear crucial conversations. He lingered longer in certain departments, timing his cleaning rounds to coincide with late-night meetings. He even went so far as to accidentally spill coffee near executives' desks, giving him an excuse to clean up and surreptitiously glance at open documents. One night, while cleaning the server room, Nathaniel overheard the IT manager, a nervous man named Frank, having a heated phone conversation. "I don't care what Richard says," Frank hissed into his phone. "I can't keep erasing the backup logs. It's too risky. If anyone finds out." And Nathaniel's ears perked up. This was exactly the kind of lead he'd been looking for. As he finished his task, he made a mental note to investigate the company's digital records more closely. The next evening, Nathaniel took his biggest risk yet. Using the access card he'd carefully cloned from an unsuspecting IT intern, he slipped into the server room during a quiet moment. His heart raced as he plugged in a small device that would allow him remote access to the company's servers. As he worked, he couldn't help but think of CLA and the other employees whose livelihoods hung in the balance. The guilt of his deception weighed heavily on him, but he reminded himself of the greater good he was working towards. Just as he was about to leave, he heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through him as he quickly unplugged the device and ducked behind a server rack. The door opened, and to his horror, Richard walked in, followed closely by Martha. "Are you sure this is secure?" Martha asked, her usually composed voice tinged with anxiety. Richard nodded confidently. "Frank assured me this is the only place not monitored by cameras. We can speak freely here." Nathaniel held his breath, barely daring to move as the conversation unfolded. "The Chimera Holdings transfer is complete," Richard said. "Another $50 million safely offshore." Martha sighed. "That's a relief. But Richard, we can't keep this up forever. Sooner or later, someone's going to notice." "By then it'll be too late," Richard replied smugly. "We'll be long gone, living the good life while Parker Enterprises crumbles. It's what Jonathan deserves for passing us over all these years." Nathaniel's fists clenched at the mention of his father's name. The betrayal cut deep, but he forced himself to remain still and silent. "And what about Nathaniel?" Martha asked. "He's not as naive as you think. He's been asking questions." Richard laughed dismissively. "Nathaniel, please. The boy's in over his head. By the time he figures anything out, we'll have bled this company dry." As they continued to discuss their plans, Nathaniel's mind raced. He was getting the evidence he needed, but at what cost? The scope of their betrayal was staggering, and it was clear they had no intention of stopping. After what felt like an eternity, Richard and Martha finally left. Nathaniel waited several minutes before emerging from his hiding spot, his legs cramped and his heart pounding. He had just witnessed the smoking gun he'd been searching for, but the reality of the situation left him feeling nauseous. Over the next few days, Nathaniel redoubled his efforts. He used his remote access to comb through financial records, piecing together the complex web of transactions that Richard and Martha had used to siphon money from the company. He discovered forged documents, falsified reports, and a trail of bribes that extended to several key members of the board. But as Nathaniel delved deeper, he stumbled upon something that shook him to his core. Hidden deep in the archives, he found a series of emails between his father and Richard dating back several years. The content of these emails suggested that his father had been aware of at least some level of financial impropriety. Nathaniel felt as if the ground had fallen out from beneath him. His father, the man he had idolized, the paragon of business ethics, had he been complicit in this corruption all along? Or had he been trying to put a stop to it? The emails were frustratingly vague, leaving room for interpretation. This discovery added a new layer of complexity to Nathaniel's mission. He was no longer just fighting to save the company, he was now grappling with the legacy of his father and the true nature of Parker Enterprises. As the evidence mounted, Nathaniel knew he was approaching a point of no return. Soon he would have to act on what he had discovered, and the fallout would be catastrophic. The company would be shaken to its core, lives would be upended, and his own role in the deception would be exposed. One night, as he was finishing up his shift, Nathaniel ran into CLA in the parking lot. She looked tired but smiled warmly when she saw him. "Nathan, heading home?" she asked. Nathaniel nodded, forcing a smile despite the turmoil roiling inside him. "Yeah, long night." CLA tilted her head, studying him with concern. "You know, you've seemed really stressed lately. Is everything okay?" For a moment, Nathaniel was tempted to confess everything. His true identity, the corruption he'd uncovered, the impossible situation he found himself in. The weight of his secrets felt unbearable. Instead, he sighed heavily. "Just workplace stuff. Sometimes it feels like this company doesn't care about people like us, you know?" CLA reached out and squeezed his arm gently. "I know it can feel that way, but we can't lose hope. Change has to start somewhere, right? Maybe one day someone will come along and make things better." Her words, meant to be encouraging, only intensified Nathaniel's inner conflict. Here was CLA, unknowingly placing her hope in him, the very person who had been deceiving her all along. As he watched CLA drive away, Nathaniel made a silent vow. No matter what it took, no matter the personal cost, he would see this through. He would expose the corruption, salvage what he could of his father's legacy, and create a company that truly valued people like CLA. And as he got into his own car, a chill ran down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that his time was running out. Richard and Martha were getting bolder, the evidence was piling up, and sooner or later, something had to give. The storm was coming, and Nathaniel knew he had to be ready when it hit. As the weeks wore on, Nathaniel found himself increasingly drawn to CLA. Their late-night conversations and shared breaks had become a bright spot in the darkness of his undercover mission. Her warmth, her resilience, and her unwavering optimism in the face of adversity touched something deep within him, something he hadn't even realized was missing. One particular grueling night, after uncovering yet another layer of Richard and Martha's deception, Nathaniel found himself emotionally drained. As he mechanically mopped the floors of the executive suite, his mind swirled with conflicting emotions, anger at the betrayal, fear of what was to come, and an overwhelming sense of loneliness. It was in this moment of vulnerability that CLA found him. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. "Nathan," she said softly, setting aside her cleaning cart, "what's going on? And don't tell me it's nothing, and I can see it's eating you up inside." Nathaniel hesitated, the weight of his secrets pressing down on him. He wanted so badly to confide in her, to share the burden of what he knew, but he couldn't risk compromising his mission or, worse, putting her in danger. He began, struggling to find the right words. "Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in all of this, like no matter how hard I work, nothing ever changes." CLA's eyes softened with understanding. She reached out and took his hand, a simple gesture that sent a jolt of electricity through Nathaniel. "I get it," she said. "Believe me, I do. But you can't let it consume you. We might just be small cogs in a big machine, but that doesn't mean we don't matter." Her words, so genuine and heartfelt, broke something open inside Nathaniel. Before he knew what was happening, he found himself pulling CLA into a tight embrace. She stiffened for a moment, surprised, but then relaxed into his arms. They stood like that for what felt like an eternity, finding solace in each other's presence. When they finally pulled apart, Nathaniel saw something new in CLA's eyes, a mixture of confusion, concern, and something else he couldn't quite name. "Nathan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "what's really going on?" For a moment Nathaniel teetered on the brink of confession. The urge to tell her everything, who he really was, what he had discovered, the impossible choice he faced, was almost overwhelming. But the rational part of his mind held him back. He couldn't drag her into this mess, couldn't risk her safety or her job. "I'm sorry," he said, taking a step back. "I shouldn't have, I'm just tired, I guess. It's been a long week." CLA studied him for a long moment, and Nathaniel had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see right through his flimsy excuse. But she didn't push further. "Okay," she said finally, "but remember, Nathan, you're not alone in this. Whatever you're going through, you don't have to face it by yourself." As she turned to go back to her work, Nathaniel felt a pang of guilt, so sharp it was almost physical. He was lying to her, to everyone, and the weight of that deception was becoming almost unbearable. Over the next few days, Nathaniel found himself seeking out CLA's company more and more. Their conversations grew deeper, more personal. He learned about her dreams of opening a small cafe someday, about her struggles as a single mother, about the quiet strength that kept her going day after day. In turn, Nathaniel shared carefully edited versions of his own life, his complicated relationship with his father, his doubts about his place in the world, his desire to make a difference. Though he couldn't tell her the whole truth, these moments of genuine connection felt like a lifeline in the stormy sea of his double life. But as his feelings for KLA grew stronger, so did the conflict within him. Every smile, every touch, every moment of shared laughter was tinged with the knowledge that it was built on a foundation of lies. He was falling for her hard and fast, but he knew that pursuing a relationship would be selfish and dangerous. One night, as they sat together during their break, CLA turned to him with a serious expression. "Nathan," she said, her voice soft but steady, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Nathaniel's heart raced. Had she figured out who he really was? "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. TLA took a deep breath. Is there something between us? Because I feel like there is, but I need to know if I'm just imagining things." The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and fraught with complication. Nathaniel looked into CLA's eyes, saw the hope and vulnerability there, and felt his carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. In that moment, he knew he had a choice to make, one that would alter the course of his mission, his life, and possibly the future of Parker Enterprises itself. As he opened his mouth to respond, the weight of his dual identity pressed down on him, forcing him to confront the reality of his situation and the consequences of his growing feelings for CLA. Nathaniel's mind raced as he stood there, CLA's question hanging in the air between them. He wanted nothing more than to tell her yes, to embrace the connection they shared, but the weight of his mission, the lies he'd told, held him back. "CLAI," he began, his voice tight with emotion. But before he could finish, the sharp ring of his phone cut through the tension. Grateful for the interruption, yet frustrated by the timing, Nathaniel excused himself and stepped away to answer. It was the encrypted call from his private investigator, the one he'd hired to dig deeper into the company's past. So Mr. Parker, the gruff voice on the other end, said, "I've found something big about your father." Nathaniel's blood ran cold. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not over the phone. Meet me at the usual place in an hour." As Nathaniel hung up, he turned to find CLA watching him, concern etched on her face. "Is everything okay?" she asked. He forced a smile, hating himself for the lies that came so easily now. "Just a family emergency. I'm sorry, CLA, but I have to go. Can we talk later?" She nodded, disappointment clear in her eyes. "Of course. Go, take care of what you need to." As Nathaniel hurried out of the building, he felt the weight of CLA's gaze on his back. He was leaving her with unanswered questions, but right now he had to focus on the mystery surrounding his father. An hour later, Nathaniel sat in a dimly lit corner of a nondescript diner, his hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. The private investigator, a weathered man named Jack, slid into the booth across from him. "What did you find?" Nathaniel asked, cutting straight to the chase. Jack pulled out a thick manila envelope. "It wasn't easy, but I managed to access some of your father's old personal files. Cryptid stuff, buried deep. What I found, well, it's complicated." With trembling hands, Nathaniel opened the envelope. Inside were documents, photos, and what looked like transcripts of phone conversations. As he began to read, his world tilted on its axis. The documents revealed a side of Jonathan Parker that Nathaniel had never known. His father, the paragon of business ethics, had been involved in a series of questionable deals dating back over a decade. There were offshore accounts, meetings with shady characters, and hints of industrial espionage. "This can't be right," Nathaniel muttered, his mind reeling. "My father, he wouldn't." Jack leaned forward, his voice low. "There's more. Keep reading." As Nathaniel delved deeper, a more complex picture emerged. Yes, his father had been involved in some ethically questionable activities, but it seemed he had been playing a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Many of the documents hinted at a larger conspiracy, one that Jonathan Parker had been trying to unravel from the inside. There were notes about a group called the Syndicate, and shadowy organization that seemed to have its tentacles in multiple major corporations, including Parker Enterprises. Jonathan had been gathering evidence, slowly building a case to expose them. But the most shocking revelation came near the end of the file. A handwritten note, dated just days before Jonathan's sudden death. Read, "They're on to me. Richard and Martha are deeper in this than I thought. If anything happens to me, N needs to know the truth. The safe behind the monet. Code 112762. Nathaniel's hands shook as he read the note again and again. His father had known. He had been trying to stop the corruption, not perpetuate it. And Richard and Martha, they were involved in something far bigger and more sinister than simple embezzlement. "Mr. Parker," Jack's voice cut through Nathaniel's tumultuous thoughts. "There's one more thing you should know. The night before your father died, he made a call to an unlisted number. I couldn't trace it, but I did manage to get a partial transcript." Nathaniel took the offered paper, his eyes scanning the cryptic conversation. His father had been arranging a meeting, planning to hand over evidence that would bring it all down. The meeting was scheduled for the day after he died. As the implications sank in, Nathaniel felt a cold fury building inside him. His father hadn't just died, he'd been silenced, and the people responsible were still out there, still in control of Parker Enterprises. "Thank you, Jack," Nathaniel said, his voice steely with determination. "You've given me exactly what I needed." As he left the diner, Nathaniel's mind was a whirlwind of emotions and plans. He needed to get to that safe, to see what evidence his father had left behind. But more than that, he needed to finish what Jonathan Parker had started. The drive back to the Parker estate felt surreal. Nathaniel hadn't been back to his childhood home since taking on his undercover role. As he walked through the quiet halls, memories of his father flooded back. Not just the stern businessman, but the man who had taught him to ride a bike, who had come hide him after nightmares, who had always pushed him to do what was right. With a deep breath, Nathaniel entered his father's study. The Monet painting hung innocently on the wall, hiding its secret. Using the code from the note, his parents' anniversary date, Nathaniel opened the safe. Inside was a USB drive, a small notebook, and a sealed envelope addressed to him. With trembling hands, Nathaniel opened the letter and began to read. "My dear Nathaniel, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer there to protect you from the truth. I'm sorry for the burden I'm placing on your shoulders, but you're the only one I can trust with this. Parker Enterprises is just the tip of the iceberg. The corruption goes deeper than you can imagine, reaching into the highest levels of government and industry. I've spent years gathering evidence, trying to find a way to bring it all down without destroying everything we've built. And I thought I could handle it on my own, protect you from this ugliness. But I was wrong. They're closing in, and I fear I've run out of time. The USB drive contains everything I've uncovered. The notebook has names, dates, connections. Use it wisely and trust no one. You'll find allies in unexpected places, but be careful. The syndicate has eyes and ears everywhere. I know I'm asking too much of you, son, but you're stronger than you know. You have your mother's heart and my determination, and if anyone can finish what I started, it's you. Remember, no matter what you might hear or think of me, know that everything I did was to protect our family and to try to make the world a little bit better. I love you, Nathaniel. Be careful, be brave, and know that I'm proud of you. Dad. As Nathaniel finished reading, tears streamed down his face. The truth was finally out, but it brought with it a crushing weight of responsibility. His undercover mission had just become something far more dangerous and far-reaching than he had ever imagined. As he gathered the items from the safe, Nathaniel's resolve hardened. He would see this through, not just for the company or for himself, but for his father's legacy. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but he was no longer alone in this fight. With a deep breath, Nathaniel steeled himself for what was to come. The real battle was just beginning, and he had a feeling it would test him in ways he had never imagined. The weight of his father's revelations bore down on Nathaniel as he drove back to his modest apartment, his mind a tumultuous storm of emotions. The USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket, its contents threatening to upend everything he thought he knew about his family, his company, and the world at large. As he entered his small living space, so different from the luxurious Parker mansion he had grown up in, Nathaniel was struck by the duality of his existence. EEO by birthright, janitor by choice, and now reluctant inheritor of a dangerous legacy. He slumped onto his worn couch, head in his hands, the enormity of his situation crashing over him like a tidal wave. His father's letter replayed in his mind. The corruption goes deeper than you can imagine, reaching into the highest levels of government and industry. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about saving Parker Enterprises anymore, it was about uncovering a conspiracy that could shake the foundations of society itself. Nathaniel's thoughts drifted to CLA, to the moment they had shared before he'd been called away. Her face, filled with hope and vulnerability, haunted him. He had been on the verge of opening up to her, of letting her in. Now, knowing the true scope of what he was up against, the idea of involving her in any way filled him with dread. Be careful, be brave, and know that I'm proud of you, his father's words echoed in his mind. How could he be brave when he felt so utterly overwhelmed? How could he be careful when every move he made could potentially expose him to danger? Nathaniel stood up abruptly, pacing the small confines of his apartment. He had a choice to make, and it wasn't an easy one. He could walk away from all of this, reveal the truth about Richard and Martha's embezzlement, and let the authorities handle the rest. It would be the safe choice, the easy choice. Parker Enterprises would take a hit, but it would survive, and he could rebuild it, free from the shadows of the past. But deep down, Nathaniel knew that wasn't an option. His father had sacrificed everything to uncover this conspiracy. To walk away now would be to render that sacrifice meaningless. And what about the countless lives that were undoubtedly affected by this far-reaching corruption? Could he live with himself knowing he had the power to make a difference but chose not to? Then there was CLA and the other employees of Parker Enterprises. They were the innocent ones in all of this, the ones who would suffer the most if the company fell. Nathaniel thought of CLA's daughter, of her dreams for a better future. How could he turn his back on them? But the path forward was fraught with danger. If he chose to continue his father's work, to dig deeper into this conspiracy, he would be putting himself in the crosshairs of powerful, ruthless people. And not just himself. Anyone close to him could become a target. The thought of CLA or any of his employees being hurt because of his actions made his stomach churn. Nathaniel moved to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, the members of this syndicate were going about their lives, secure in the belief that their secrets were safe. They had silenced his father, but they hadn't counted on Jonathan Parker's final act of defiance, passing the torch to his son. As the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, Nathaniel made his decision. He couldn't walk away, couldn't pretend he didn't know what he now knew. He would continue his undercover work, would dig deeper into this conspiracy, and would do whatever it took to expose the truth. But he would do it smart. He would be careful, methodical, and above all, he would protect those around him. CLA, the employees of Parker Enterprises, they could never know the full extent of what was happening. He would carry this burden alone for their sake. Nathaniel took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders as he faced his reflection in the window. He barely recognized the man staring back at him. Gone was the naive hair, replaced by someone harder, more determined. He was no longer just Nathaniel Parker, CEO, or Nathan the janitor. He was his father's son, the bearer of a dangerous truth, and the only one who could set things right. As he prepared for another day of his double life, Nathaniel silently vowed to see this through, no matter the personal cost. A path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and difficult choices, but he was ready to face it head-on, for his father, for CLA, for all those who depended on Parker Enterprises. He would uncover the truth and bring down the syndicate, or die trying. The following weeks were a delicate balancing act for Nathaniel. By day, he maintained his CEO persona, attending meetings and making decisions that kept Parker Enterprises running smoothly. So by night, he continued his janitorial duties, gathering information and slowly piecing together the puzzle his father had left behind. But now there was a new edge to his investigations. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. Every overheard conversation could be a clue or a trap. Nathaniel found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, aware that one wrong move could expose him to the very forces that had silenced his father. One night, as Nathaniel was cleaning near the IT department, he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. "I'm telling you, someone's been accessing restricted files," a nervous voice said. It was Frank, the IT manager. "If Richard finds out..." "Calm down," another voice replied. Nathaniel recognized it as belonging to one of Richard's closest associates. "We'll find the leak and plug it, permanently if necessary." Nathaniel's heart raced. They were onto him, or at least they suspected something was amiss. He needed to be more careful, but he also knew he was running out of time. The next day, Nathaniel noticed subtle changes in the office atmosphere. Security had been tightened, and there were unfamiliar faces in the IT department. He overheard whispers about a security audit being conducted. As he left the building that evening, Nathaniel felt eyes on him. Glancing in his rearview mirror, he noticed a black sedan following at a discreet distance. His palms began to sweat as he took a series of random turns, trying to lose his tail. After nearly an hour of nerve-wracking evasion, he finally managed to shake off the pursuer. Back in the safety of his apartment, Nathaniel's mind raced. The stakes had just gotten higher, and he needed to accelerate his plans. He spent the night poring over the files on the USB drive, cross-referencing them with his father's notebook. A pattern was emerging, pointing to a series of shell companies and offshore accounts that seemed to be the key to the syndicate's operations. The next few days were tense. Nathaniel felt like he was walking on eggshells, hyper-aware of every glance, every whispered conversation. He noticed Richard watching him more closely during meetings, a calculating look in his eyes. One evening, as Nathaniel was leaving work in his janitorial disguise, he was approached by two large men in suits. "Excuse me, sir," one of them said, his tone deceptively polite. "We need you to come with us for some questioning." Nathaniel's heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. "What's this about?" he asked, adopting the meek tone he'd perfected for his janitor persona. "Just a routine security check," the other man said, taking a step closer. "It won't take long." Nathaniel knew he couldn't risk going with them. If his cover was blown, everything would be lost. In a split-second decision, he shoved his cleaning cart into the men and took off running. The sound of heavy footsteps behind him spurred Nathaniel on as he sprinted through the parking garage. He weaved between cars, his mind racing to formulate an escape plan. As he rounded a corner, he saw CLA getting into her car. Without thinking, he called out to her, "CLA, I need help." She looked up, startled, then saw the men chasing him. Without hesitation, she opened her car door. "Get in," she yelled. Nathaniel dove into the passenger seat as CLA gunned the engine. They peeled out of the parking garage, leaving the bewildered men behind. As they sped through the city streets, CLA glanced at Nathaniel, her eyes wide with confusion and concern. "Nathan, what the hell is going on?" "Atta." As Nathaniel's mind raced, he couldn't tell her the whole truth, but he owed her some kind of explanation. I saw something I shouldn't have," he said, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Corruption in the company, big stuff. They're after me because of it." CLA's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Oh my God," she whispered, "what are we going to do?" It being a question touched Nathaniel deeply. Even in this moment of crisis, CLA was thinking of how to help him. It only reinforced his determination to protect her from the full truth. "Just drop me off somewhere safe," he said. "The less you know, the better. I don't want you involved in this." CLA shook her head firmly. "No way, you're in trouble, and I'm not leaving you alone. We'll figure this out together." As they drove through the night, Nathaniel felt a mix of gratitude and guilt. CLA's loyalty was touching, but he knew he was putting her in danger just by being near her. They ended up at a small motel on the outskirts of town. As they sat in the car, the engine cooling in the silent parking lot, CLA turned to Nathaniel. "Nathan," she said softly, "what's really going on? I know there's more you're not telling me." Nathaniel looked into her eyes, seeing the trust and concern there. He wanted so badly to confide in her, to share the burden of what he knew, but the memory of his father's fate held him back. "CLA," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "there's so much I want to tell you. But the less you know, the safer you'll be. Please trust me on this." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, "I trust you, but promise me you'll be careful. And if you need me, I'm here, no matter what." As CLA drove away, leaving Nathaniel at the motel, he watched her taillights disappear into the night. He was more certain than ever that he needed to end this quickly. The danger was no longer just to him, it was threatening to engulf those he cared about. With renewed determination, Nathaniel entered the motel room, ready to plan his next move. The syndicate had made their first overt move against him, but he wasn't going to back down. If anything, this close call had only strengthened his resolve. The endgame was approaching, and Nathaniel knew he had to be ready for whatever came next. As Nathaniel grappled with the increasing dangers of his investigation, a new threat emerged on the horizon. Titan Global, an aggressive conglomerate known for its ruthless takeovers, had set its sights on Parker Enterprises. The news broke early one morning, sending shockwaves through the company. Nathaniel, still maintaining his dual identities, watched the chaos unfold from two perspectives. As the CEO, he was immediately thrust into emergency meetings with the board and legal team. As the janitor, he overheard panicked conversations among employees who feared for their jobs. In the boardroom, Nathaniel sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of calm despite the turmoil inside him. Richard, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, was outlining the situation. "Titan Global has been quietly buying up shares for months," Richard explained, his voice tense. "They now own nearly 30% of the company. They're pushing for a seat on the board, and rumors suggest they're planning a hostile takeover." The room erupted into worried murmurs. Nathaniel raised a hand, silencing the group. "What do we know about their motivations?" he asked, his mind racing. Was this just business, or was there a connection to the syndicate? Martha spoke up, usual composure slipping slightly. Officially, they claim it's about market expansion and synergies. But off the record, there are whispers that they're after our research division, particularly Project Chimera. And Nathaniel's ears perked up at the mention of Chimera. He had come across references to it in his father's files, but details were scarce. Whatever it was, it seemed to be at the heart of the syndicate's interest in Parker Enterprises. As the meeting continued, strategies were proposed and debated. Poison pill defenses, white knight investors, legal challenges, all options were on the table. But Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than a simple corporate takeover. Later that day, as he made his rounds in his janitor disguise, Nathaniel picked up snippets of conversation that only deepened his suspicions. "I heard Titan's CEO was seen having dinner with Richard last month," one accountant whispered to another. "Doesn't that seem odd if they're trying to take us over?" In the IT department, Nathaniel overheard Frank, the nervous manager, on the phone. "Yes, sir. All the Chimera files have been secured. No one outside the approved list can access them now." As the day wore on, Nathaniel's mind worked overtime, trying to connect the dots. The takeover attempt, Project Chimera, Richard's secret meetings, it all had to be related to the syndicate somehow. That evening, as Nathaniel was preparing to leave, he received an unexpected visitor in his office. A tall, imposing man in an impeccable suit strode in, flanked by 2 bodyguards. "Mr. Parker," the man said, his voice smooth as silk but with an underlying edge. "Alexander Vance, CEO of Titan Global. I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced." And Nathaniel stood, his guard immediately up. "Mr. Vance, to what do I owe this pleasure?" Vance smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I thought it was time we met face to face, given our company's future relationship." For the next half hour, Vance and Nathaniel engaged in a verbal chess match. Vance spoke of synergies and mutual benefits, while subtly hinting at the consequences of resistance. Nathaniel parried each move, neither committing nor outright rejecting Titan's advances. As Vance prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "You know, Mr. Parker, your father and I had an understanding. It would be a shame if that understanding were to lapse under new management." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air as Vance departed, leaving Nathaniel with a chill running down his spine. The mention of his father had confirmed his suspicions. Titan Global was definitely connected to the syndicate. Later that night, as Nathaniel pored over his father's files in his apartment, he found a cryptic note about Titan Global. It suggested that the company was a front for the syndicate's more legitimate operations, used to exert influence and control over key industries. The takeover attempt wasn't just a corporate move, it was the syndicate trying to seize control of whatever secrets lay within Project Chimera. So the pieces started to fall into place. Nathaniel realized he was now fighting a war on 2 fronts. He had to fend off Titan Global's takeover attempt while continuing his covert investigation into the syndicate, and he had to do it all while maintaining his cover and protecting those around him. The stakes had never been higher. If Titan succeeded in taking over Parker Enterprises, not only would countless jobs be at risk, but the syndicate would gain control of whatever powerful secret lay within Project Chimera. Nathaniel looked out his window at the city skyline, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. He knew that the coming weeks would test him like never before. The fate of Parker Enterprises, the legacy of his father, and perhaps even more hung in the balance. With a deep breath, Nathaniel turned back to his father's files. He had work to do, and time was running out. The battle for Parker Enterprises and against the syndicate was about to begin in earnest. As the pressure mounted from both the syndicate and Titan Global's takeover attempt, Nathaniel found himself increasingly relying on CLA's unwavering support. Her presence had become a beacon of normalcy in his chaotic double life. However, fate had one more twist in store, one that would shake Nathaniel to his core. It began innocuously enough. During one of their late-night cleaning shifts, CLA mentioned offhandedly that she had once worked in the corporate world. "It feels like a lifetime ago," she said with a wistful smile, "before Sophia was born." Nathaniel's curiosity was piqued. In all their conversations, CLA had never gone into detail about her life before Parker Enterprises. "What kind of work did you do?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. CLA hesitated, a shadow passing over her face. "Oh, corporate stuff. Nothing exciting." She quickly changed the subject, but Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. His instincts, honed by weeks of investigation, told him to dig deeper. Using his access to the company's records, Nathaniel began to look into CLA's background. What he found left him reeling. Clara Anderson wasn't just a former corporate employee. She had been a rising star in the finance world, working for none other than Titan Global. Her specialty, corporate acquisitions and mergers. Nathaniel's mind raced. Was it possible that CLA was a plant sent by Titan to infiltrate Parker Enterprises? The thought made him sick to his stomach. He couldn't believe that the woman he had grown to care for, to trust, could be part of the very conspiracy he was fighting against. But as he delved deeper, the story became even more complex. CLA had abruptly left Titan Global 7 years ago, right around the time her daughter was born. There were rumors of a scandal, quickly hushed up, but the details were frustratingly vague. Determined to uncover the truth, Nathaniel took a calculated risk. He used his CEO access to pull up CLA's original job application to Parker Enterprises. What he found there sent a chill down his spine. The reference contact for CLA's application was a name Nathaniel recognized from his father's files, James Holbrook, a man suspected of being a high-ranking member of the syndicate. Nathaniel's world spun. CLA, the one person he thought he could trust, had connections to both Titan Global and the syndicate. But what did it mean? Was she a victim or a player in this grand conspiracy? He spent a sleepless night wrestling with this new information. Part of him wanted to confront CLA immediately to demand answers, but the more rational part of his mind counseled caution. If CLA was indeed involved with the syndicate, tipping his hand could be disastrous. The next day, Nathaniel watched CLA with new eyes. Every action, every word seemed to take on new significance. Was her kindness genuine or part of an elaborate act? The doubt gnawed at him, threatening to unravel the one relationship he had come to depend on. As they worked side by side that evening, CLA must have sensed his unease. "Nathan, is everything okay?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. "You seem distant." Nathaniel forced a smile. "Just tired," he lied. "It's been a long week." CLA nodded sympathetically, placing a hand on his arm. The gesture, once comforting, now sent conflicting emotions through Nathaniel. He wanted to believe in her, to trust in the connection they had formed, but the evidence he had uncovered couldn't be ignored. As the night wore on, Nathaniel found himself studying CLA, looking for any sign that might reveal her true allegiance. But all he saw was the same hard-working, kind-hearted woman he had come to know over the past weeks. Finally, as their shift was ending, Nathaniel made a decision. He couldn't go on like this, suspecting CLA at every turn. He needed answers, even if those answers might shatter the one genuine relationship he had formed during this ordeal. "CLA," he said, his voice tight with tension. "There's something I need to ask you, something important." She turned to him, curiosity and a hint of apprehension in her eyes. "What is it, Nathan?" Nathaniel took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "I need you to tell me the truth about your past, about Titan Global and about James Holbrook." The color drained from CLA's face, her eyes widening in shock and fear. In that moment, Nathaniel knew that whatever CLA's story was, it was far more complicated than he had imagined. As he waited for her response, he realized that her answer could change everything, not just for their relationship, but for his entire mission. The tension in the boardroom was palpable as Nathaniel Parker stood at the head of the table, his heart racing but his exterior calm. The board members, along with key executives, including Richard and Martha, sat in uneasy silence, wondering why they had been summoned to this unexpected emergency meeting. Nathaniel took a deep breath, his mind flashing back to the conversation with CLA just hours earlier. Her revelation had been shocking, but it also provided the final piece of the puzzle he needed. Now it was time to bring everything into the light. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nathaniel began, his voice steady and authoritative, "I've called you here today because Parker Enterprises stands at a crossroads. For years, this company has been a beacon of innovation and integrity in the business world. But today I'm here to tell you that that integrity has been compromised." A murmur ran through the room. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Martha's face remained an impassive mask. "Mr. Parker," one of the board members spoke up, "what exactly are you implying?" Nathaniel's gaze swept the room, locking eyes with each person present. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating, unequivocally, that there has been a systematic campaign of corruption and embezzlement within our company, reaching to the highest levels of management." The room erupted into shocked exclamations and denials. Richard stood up, his face red with anger. "This is preposterous. You can't just make accusations like this without evidence." "Oh, but I have evidence, Richard," Nathaniel replied calmly. He nodded to his assistant, who began distributing folders to everyone present. "In fact, I have a great deal of evidence." As the board members began to leaf through the documents, their expressions changed from skepticism to shock and dismay. Nathaniel continued, "What you're looking at is just a fraction of the evidence I've gathered over the past months. Financial records, emails, transcripts of conversations, all pointing to a massive scheme of embezzlement and fraud." Martha, her composure finally cracking, spoke up. "Nathaniel, surely there must be some misunderstanding. These documents, they could be taken out of context." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "There's no misunderstanding, Martha. You and Richard have been at the center of this corruption for years. But it goes beyond just the two of you. This scheme reaches outside our company, connecting us to a larger conspiracy known as the Syndicate." At the mention of the Syndicate, several board members gasped. Nathaniel could see recognition and fear in some of their eyes, confirming his suspicion that the corruption had spread further than just Richard and Martha. "But how?" one of the older board members stammered. "How did you uncover all this?" Here, Nathaniel paused. The moment of truth had arrived. "I've been conducting my own undercover investigation for months," he revealed, posing as a janitor to gain unrestricted access to every level of the company. The revelation sent another shockwave through the room. Richard, his face now ashen, slumped back into his chair. Nathaniel pressed on. "But I wasn't working alone. My father, Jonathan Parker, had begun this investigation years ago. He discovered the depth of the corruption and was working to expose it when he..." Nathaniel's voice caught for a moment when he was silenced. The implication hung heavy in the air. Several board members looked ill, while others appeared on the verge of tears. "Mr. Parker, the head of the legal department, spoke up. If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond internal corruption. We're talking about criminal activities on a massive scale." Nathaniel nodded gravely. "You're right. And it gets worse. The recent takeover attempt by Titan Global isn't just a corporate maneuver. Titan is a front for the Syndicate, attempting to gain control of our company and, specifically, Project Chimera." At the mention of Project Chimera, Richard lunged forward. "You have no idea what you're meddling with, boy," he snarled. "Some secrets are better left buried." Two security guards, whom Nathaniel had stationed outside, entered the room at this outburst, moving to restrain Richard. Nathaniel addressed the board again. Project Chimera, as some of you may know, is not just another RD initiative. It's a groundbreaking technology with implications that go far beyond the corporate world. And my father discovered that the Syndicate wants to use this technology for purposes that could threaten national, even global security. The room fell silent as the weight of Nathaniel's words sank in. The head of the board, a woman who had worked alongside Nathaniel's father for decades, finally spoke. "Nathaniel, these are extremely serious allegations. What do you propose we do?" So Nathaniel straightened, his resolve clear in his voice. "First, we need to clean house. Richard, Martha, and anyone else implicated in these documents need to be suspended immediately, pending a full investigation. Second, we need to secure Project Chimera and all related research. And third, we need to reach out to the proper authorities. This goes beyond what we can handle internally. As the board members nodded in agreement, Martha suddenly stood up. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said, her voice trembling. "The syndicate, they won't let this go. They'll come after you, after all of us." Nathaniel met her gaze steadily. "I'm well aware of the risks, Martha, but I won't let fear of retaliation stop us from doing what's right. My father gave his life trying to expose this corruption, and I intend to finish what he started." As security began to escort Richard and Martha out of the room, Nathaniel turned back to the board. "I know this is a lot to process, and we have difficult days ahead, but I believe in this company and what it can be. Together we can root out this corruption and rebuild Parker Enterprises into something we can all be proud of." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Law enforcement was contacted, statements were taken, and emergency protocols were put into place to secure sensitive information and technology. As the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow through the boardroom windows, Nathaniel found himself alone, exhausted but resolute. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from CLA, just saw the news. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" And Nathaniel smiled wearily. After their intense conversation, CLA had proven to be an unexpected ally, her insider knowledge of Titan Global proving invaluable. There was still much to discuss between them, but for now he was just grateful for her support. As he looked out over the awakening city, Nathaniel knew that this was just the beginning. The syndicate wouldn't take this exposure lying down, and the battle for Parker Enterprises, and perhaps for something much bigger, was far from over. But for the first time in months, Nathaniel felt a glimmer of hope. He had taken the first step towards justice, towards fulfilling his father's legacy, and towards creating the kind of company and world that he believed in. With a deep breath, Nathaniel turned back to his desk. There was still much work to be done, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The days following Nathaniel's explosive revelation to the board were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. The news of the corruption scandal spread like wildfire through Parker Enterprises, leaving shock and disbelief in its wake. Employees at all levels struggled to come to terms with the betrayal of trust, while the media circus outside the company's headquarters grew with each passing hour. Richard and Martha, once the pinnacle of corporate success, now found themselves in a stark reversal of fortune. They were escorted from the premises in handcuffs, their faces plastered across every news channel and newspaper. The sight of these once powerful figures brought low was a sobering reminder of the consequences of their actions. Inside Parker Enterprises, the atmosphere was tense and chaotic. Security had been tightened, with guards posted at every entrance and employees subjected to increased scrutiny. The IT department worked around the clock to secure the company's systems, fearing potential cyber attacks or data breaches from the syndicate. Nathaniel, now fully embracing his role as CEO, found himself juggling multiple crises. He spent hours in meetings with the legal team, preparing for the inevitable investigations and lawsuits. The board, still reeling from the revelations, demanded constant updates and reassurances. But perhaps the most challenging aspect was addressing the employees. Nathaniel knew that transparency was crucial in rebuilding trust, but he also had to be careful not to compromise the ongoing investigation. In a company-wide meeting, Nathaniel stood before a sea of anxious faces. "I know the past few days have been incredibly difficult and confusing for all of you," he began, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "The betrayal we've uncovered goes against everything Parker Enterprises stands for. But I want you to know that the actions of a few do not define who we are as a company." He went on to outline the steps being taken to address the corruption, emphasizing that the vast majority of employees were not implicated in any wrongdoing. "We will emerge from this stronger and more transparent than ever," he promised. "Your hard work and dedication are what truly make this company great, and that hasn't changed." As Nathaniel worked to stabilize the company, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The syndicate, now exposed, would surely retaliate, and Titan Global's takeover attempt still loomed on the horizon. His suspicions were confirmed late one night as he was leaving the office. A sleek black car pulled up beside him, and the window rolled down to reveal Alexander Vance, CEO of Titan Global. "Mr. Parker," Vance said, his voice cold. "I think it's time we had a real conversation." Nathaniel tensed, acutely aware of his vulnerability. "Mr. Vance, I believe any discussions between us should be conducted through official channels." Vance's laugh was without humor. "Oh, I think we're well past official channels, don't you? Get in. Unless you want your little exposed to be the last thing you ever do." Recognizing the threat for what it was, Nathaniel cautiously entered the car. As they drove through the darkened city streets, Vance spoke again. "You've caused quite a stir, Mr. Parker. The syndicate is not pleased." Nathaniel met Vance's gaze steadily. "I'm not in the business of pleasing criminals, Mr. Vance, and neither should you be." Vance's eyes narrowed. "You're naive if you think it's that simple. The syndicate's reach goes far beyond what you've uncovered. Your father understood that. He knew how to play the game." "And my father was trying to stop you," Nathaniel retorted, "and I intend to finish what he started." "Your father," Vance said, his voice dangerously soft, "was a practical man. He understood the balance of power. You'd do well to learn from his example." A car came to a stop in a deserted parking lot. Vance turned to face Nathaniel fully. "Here's how this is going to work. You're going to retract your statements, claim it was all a misunderstanding. Titan Global's offer still stands. We'll acquire Parker Enterprises, and all this unpleasantness can be forgotten." Nathaniel's mind raced. He knew he was in a precarious position, but he couldn't back down now. "And if I refuse?" Vance's smile was cold. "Then the next headline won't be about corporate corruption. It'll be about the tragic accident that befell the young CEO of Parker Enterprises. And trust me, that will just be the beginning. Everyone you care about, everyone involved in your little investigation, they'll all pay the price." The threat hung heavy in the air. Nathaniel thought of CLA, of the loyal employees at Parker Enterprises, of his father's sacrifice. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, but it also steeled his resolve. "You're right about one thing, Mr. Vance," Nathaniel said, his voice quiet but firm. "And my father was a practical man, and he taught me a very practical lesson: always be prepared." With that, Nathaniel pulled out his phone, revealing that he had been recording the entire conversation. "I think the authorities will be very interested in this, don't you?" Vance's face contorted with rage. "You fool. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Nathaniel opened the car door, pausing before he stepped out. "I've done exactly what my father would have wanted. I've chosen to fight back." "Why do we?" As he walked away from the car, Nathaniel could hear Vance shouting threats behind him, but he didn't look back. He knew that his actions tonight had escalated the conflict to a new level. The syndicate would come at him with everything they had now. But as he looked up at the night sky, Nathaniel felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead was dangerous, but for the first time since this all began, he felt truly certain of his course. He would protect Parker Enterprises, honor his father's memory, and take down the syndicate, no matter the cost. The real battle, Nathaniel realized, was just beginning. In the confrontation with Alexander Vance marked a turning point in Nathaniel's battle against the syndicate. He knew they would retaliate, but he underestimated just how quickly and ruthlessly they would strike. It happened 3 days after his meeting with Vance. Nathaniel was leaving the office late, his mind preoccupied with the latest developments in the investigation. As he approached his car in the deserted parking garage, he felt a sudden sense of unease. Before he could react, a van screeched to a halt beside him, and several masked figures leapt out. Nathaniel fought back fiercely, his body responding with the self-defense techniques he'd learned years ago. But he was outnumbered and caught off guard. A sharp pain in his neck told him he'd been injected with something. As the world began to spin and darken around him, his last conscious thought was of CLA. When Nathaniel awoke, he found himself in a dimly lit room, bound to a chair. His head throbbed, and his mouth felt like it was filled with cotton. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he made out the figure of Alexander Vance standing before him. "Welcome back, Mr. Parker," Vance said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I hope you're comfortable. We have much to discuss." Over the next few hours, Vance and his associate subjected Nathaniel to a grueling interrogation. They wanted to know everything, what evidence he had, who else was involved in the investigation, and most importantly, the details of Project Chimera. Despite the physical discomfort and the effects of whatever drug they'd given him, Nathaniel remained defiant. He refused to divulge any information, his resolve strengthened by thoughts of his father and the people counting on him. Meanwhile, back at Parker Enterprises, Nathaniel's absence had not gone unnoticed. CLA, who had been anxiously waiting to hear from him after their last conversation, was the first to raise the alarm. Something's wrong, she insisted to the security team. Nathaniel wouldn't just disappear like this, not with everything that's going on. As the hours ticked by with no word from Nathaniel, CLA took matters into her own hands. Drawing on her past experience in the corporate world and the connection she still maintained, she began her own investigation. It was CLA who made the crucial breakthrough. Using her knowledge of Titan Global's operations and some less than legal hacking skills she'd picked up over the years, she managed to trace the van that had taken Nathaniel to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Knowing that time was of the essence, CLA faced a difficult decision. She could turn the information over to the authorities, but bureaucracy might slow them down, or she could take a more direct approach. In a moment of determination, CLA chose the latter. She reached out to a small group of trusted Parker Enterprises employees, individuals she knew were loyal to Nathaniel and the company. Together, they formulated a daring rescue plan. As night fell, CLA and her makeshift team approached the warehouse. Using thermal imaging equipment borrowed from Parker Enterprises' R&D department, they identified the room where Nathaniel was being held. Inside the warehouse, Nathaniel was reaching his breaking point. The physical and mental strain of the interrogation was taking its toll. Vance, growing increasingly frustrated, decided to change tactics. "You know, Mr. Parker," he said, pacing around Nathaniel's chair, "your stubbornness is admirable but foolish. Perhaps you need some motivation." He nodded to one of his men, who brought out a laptop. "Let's see how your resolve holds up when it's not just your life on the line." The screen flickered to life, showing a live feed of CLA's apartment. Nathaniel's heart raced as he saw Sophia, CLA's daughter, doing homework at the kitchen table, blissfully unaware of the danger. "It would be a shame if anything were to happen to them, wouldn't it?" Vance said, his voice sickeningly sweet. Nathaniel felt a surge of anger and fear. "If you touch them, I swear I'll..." His threat was cut short by a sudden commotion outside the room. The sound of gunfire and shouts filled the air. Vance whirled around, his composure finally cracking. "What the hell is going on?" The door burst open, and through the chaos, Nathaniel saw a familiar figure. CLA, her face set in grim determination, led a group of Parker Enterprises employees into the room. The surprise and precision of their attack caught Vance and his men off guard. In the ensuing struggle, Nathaniel managed to work his bonds loose. Despite his weakened state, he joined the fray, fueled by adrenaline and a burning desire for justice. The fight was intense but brief. Vance and his men, though dangerous, were unprepared for the determination of CLA and her team. As sirens wailed in the distance, CLA had alerted the authorities as a backup. Vance realized the game was up. As the dust settled, CLA rushed to Nathaniel's side. "Oh, are you okay?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern as she took in his battered appearance. Nathaniel nodded weakly, overwhelmed by the turn of events. "CLA, how did you?" She smiled, a mix of relief and pride on her face. "Did you really think I'd let them take you without a fight? We're in this together, remember." As the police arrived and began to secure the scene, Nathaniel turned to CLA, his expression serious. "They threatened Sophia. We need to make sure she's safe." CLA's face paled, but she quickly regained her composure. "She's fine. I made sure of that before coming here. But you're right, we need to get to her." As they prepared to leave, Nathaniel looked around at the loyal employees who had risked everything to save him. He felt a surge of gratitude and determination. This incident had shown him the true strength of Parker Enterprises, not its technology or its profits, but its people. "Thank you," he said to the group, his voice thick with emotion. "What you've done here, I'll never forget it." As they made their way out of the warehouse, Nathaniel leaning on CLA for support, he knew that this was far from over. The syndicate had shown how far they were willing to go, and the battle for Parker Enterprises and for justice was far from won. But looking at CLA, seeing the strength and loyalty in her eyes, Nathaniel felt a renewed sense of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he wouldn't have to face them alone. Together they had a fighting chance to bring down the syndicate and restore Parker Enterprises to what it was always meant to be. As they stepped into the cool night air, Nathaniel took a deep breath. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while he felt ready to face it head-on. In the days following his rescue, Nathaniel found himself facing the most challenging decision of his life. The kidnapping attempt had brought the danger posed by the syndicate into sharp focus, not just for him, but for everyone associated with Parker Enterprises. The company was in turmoil, its stock price plummeting as news of the scandal and subsequent violence dominated the headlines. Nathaniel sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of reports and legal documents. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. On one side lay the path of justice, continuing to pursue the syndicate, exposing their crimes and seeing Richard, Martha, and their collaborators brought to trial. On the other side was the stability of Parker Enterprises and the livelihoods of thousands of employees who depended on the company. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was CLA, her face etched with concern. "The board is waiting for you," she said softly. "They're expecting a decision." Nathaniel nodded, steeling himself for the meeting ahead. As he walked into the boardroom, he could feel the tension in the air. The board members, once united behind him, now seemed divided. Some still supported his crusade against corruption, while others worried about the company's survival. "Mr. Parker, the head of the board began, her voice grave, we've reviewed the situation and we believe it's time to consider our options. The continued pursuit of this investigation is putting the entire company at risk." Another board member chimed in, "Our stock has dropped 30% in the last week alone. Clients are pulling out and we're facing potential lawsuits from shareholders. And if this continues, we might not have a company left to save." Nathaniel listened, his mind racing. He knew they had valid points. The company's stability was hanging by a thread, and every day the investigation continued, the thread grew thinner. "What are you suggesting?" Nathaniel asked, although he already knew the answer. The board exchanged glances before the head spoke again. "We believe it might be in the best interest of the company to reach a settlement with the syndicate." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Nathaniel felt a surge of anger and disbelief. His settlement? After everything they've done? After what happened to my father? "We understand your personal stake in this," Nathaniel, another board member, said, his tone placating. "But we have to think about the bigger picture. Thousands of jobs are at stake. Families depend on this company." As the discussion continued, Nathaniel found his resolve wavering. He thought of the employees he'd met during his time undercover, hard-working people like Mike, Sarah, and Carlos. He thought of CLA and her daughter Sophia, whose futures were tied to the fate of Parker Enterprises. But then his mind turned to his father, to the sacrifices he had made in pursuit of the truth. He thought of the corruption that had festered within the company, the lives that had been ruined by the syndicate's greed. If we back down now, Nathaniel argued, if we let them win, what message does that send? That crime pays, that corruption is acceptable as long as it's profitable. The debate raged on with valid points made on both sides. As Nathaniel listened, he realized that this decision would define not just his leadership, but the very soul of Parker Enterprises. And after hours of intense discussion, Nathaniel called for a break. He needed time to think, to weigh the consequences of each path. As he stood by the window, looking out at the city, he felt a presence beside him. It was CLA. "What do you think I should do?" he asked her, his voice barely above a whisper. CLA was quiet for a moment before responding. "I can't make this decision for you, Nathaniel, but I can tell you this. The reason I believe in you, the reason I risked everything to help you, is because you stand for something, and you're fighting for what's right, not just what's easy." Her words resonated deeply with Nathaniel. He thought back to his time as a janitor, to the conversations he'd had with employees at all levels of the company. They hadn't just been looking for a paycheck, they had believed in what Parker Enterprises stood for. As the board reconvened, Nathaniel took his place at the head of the table. All eyes turned to him, waiting for his decision. He took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would set the course for the future of Parker Enterprises. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and resolute, "I've made my decision. We will not be settling with the syndicate. We will continue our fight for justice, no matter the cost." A murmur ran through the room, some of approval, some of dismay. Nathaniel raised his hand for silence. "I understand the risks. I know the challenges we face. But Parker Enterprises was built on principles of integrity and innovation. If we compromise those principles now, we lose everything that makes this company great." He paused, looking each board member in the eye. "It won't be easy. We'll have to fight for every contract, rebuild trust with our shareholders, and work harder than we ever have before. But I believe in this company, and I believe in the people who make it what it is. Together we can weather this storm and emerge stronger on the other side." As Nathaniel finished speaking, he could see the impact of his words. Some board members nodded in agreement, while others looked skeptical. But there was a new energy in the room, a sense of purpose that had been missing before. The path ahead would be difficult, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But as Nathaniel looked at CLA, seeing the pride and determination in her eyes, he knew he had made the right choice. Parker Enterprises would stand for justice no matter the cost. The real fight was just beginning. As Nathaniel steeled himself for the battles ahead, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still a missing piece to the puzzle. CLA's unwavering support and her mysterious past continued to nag at him. He knew there was more to her story, and he was determined to uncover the truth. Late one night, as Nathaniel pored over his father's old files in search of any additional information about the syndicate, he stumbled upon a folder he hadn't noticed before. It was tucked away behind a false panel in his father's desk, clearly meant to be hidden. With trembling hands, Nathaniel opened the folder. Inside he found a series of letters, photographs, and legal documents. As he began to read, his world tilted on its axis. The documents revealed a truth so shocking that Nathaniel had to read them multiple times to fully comprehend their implications. CLA Clara Anderson was not just a former employee of Titan Global or a random hire at Parker Enterprises. She was Jonathan Parker's illegitimate daughter. The letters detailed a relationship his father had had years ago before he married Nathaniel's mother. Clara's mother had worked for Parker Enterprises in its early days, and she and Jonathan had fallen in love. But societal pressures and Jonathan's ambitions had led him to end the relationship when he learned of the pregnancy. Photographs showed a young Jonathan with Clara's mother, their faces alight with love and hope. There were even a few baby pictures of Clara, bearing a striking resemblance to Nathaniel's own childhood photos. As Nathaniel read on, he learned that his father had kept tabs on Clara throughout her life, secretly supporting her and her mother financially. He had even orchestrated her hiring at Parker Enterprises, wanting to keep her close without revealing their true connection. The final document in the folder was a letter addressed to Nathaniel, dated just days before Jonathan's death. In it, his father confessed everything, expressing deep regret for his past actions and his failure to acknowledge Clara as his daughter. He urged Nathaniel to right this wrong, to welcome Clara into the family, and to protect her from the dangers that he feared were closing in. Nathaniel sat back, his mind reeling from the revelation. CLA Clara was his half-sister, the woman he had been developing feelings for. The one who had risked everything to save him was family. As the shock began to subside, pieces started falling into place. Clara's innate understanding of the corporate world, her unexpected skills, her deep connection to Parker Enterprises, it all made sense now. She had inherited their father's intelligence and determination. Overwhelmed by emotion, Nathaniel knew he had to confront Clara with this information immediately. He couldn't bear to keep this secret from her any longer. He found her working late in her office, poring over documents related to the ongoing investigation. When she looked up and saw his expression, concern immediately crossed her face. "Nathaniel, what's wrong?" she asked, rising from her desk. He took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. "Clara, I've discovered something. About you, about us." Confusion flickered across her features. "What do you mean?" Slowly, carefully, Nathaniel revealed what he had learned. He watched as Clara's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, to shock, and finally to a mix of pain and wonder. "My father, Jonathan Parker, was my father," she whispered, her voice trembling. Nathaniel nodded, fighting back his own tears. "Yes, we're siblings, Clara. Half-siblings." The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. All the moments they had shared, the growing connection they had felt, it all took on a new meaning. Clara sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. "I always felt a connection to this company, to your family, but I never imagined." Nathaniel moved to her side, kneeling beside her chair. "I'm so sorry you were kept in the dark all these years. Clara, please know that this changes nothing about how I feel about you. You're family. You've always been family, even when we didn't know it." Tears streamed down Clara's face as she looked at Nathaniel, her brother. "All my life, I felt like something was missing, like I didn't quite belong anywhere. And now you know where you belong," Nathaniel finished for her, taking her hand in his. "With me, with Parker Enterprises. This is your legacy too, Clara." As they embraced, both laughing and crying, Nathaniel felt a sense of completion he had never experienced before. The road ahead was still fraught with danger and uncertainty, but now he truly wasn't alone. He had found not just an ally, but a sister. The revelation of their true relationship would change everything. Their personal dynamic, the future of Parker Enterprises, and perhaps even the fight against the syndicate. But as Nathaniel held his newfound sister, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as family.